A Soviet fighter pilot sits in his cockpit at an Iraqi airbase, running through final checks before takeoff. The morning sun hasn't yet burned away the desert chill. His hands move with practiced precision across switches and dials, muscle memory from hundreds of training flights. But this morning is different. This morning, every action carries the weight of betrayal. Every second ticks toward a decision that will change the course of aerial warfare and expose the Soviet Union's most guarded aviation secrets to its greatest adversary. The aircraft beneath him represents the pinnacle of Soviet engineering, a machine Moscow believed was untouchable, protected by layers of security, ideology, and fear. Yet, in less than 2 hours, this pilot will deliver it intact to Israel, completing one of the most consequential intelligence operations of the Cold War. Not through force or theft, but through something far more powerful: the exploitation of human discontent. This is how Mossad acquired the MiG-21. Not the Hollywood version with car chases and gunfights, but the real story of patient intelligence work, psychological vulnerability, and the recognition that even the most secure weapon system has one fatal weakness: the person flying it. The summer of 1966 marked a turning point in Middle Eastern military dynamics. Soviet-made aircraft dominated Arab air forces, and among them, the MiG-21 stood as the ultimate symbol of communist technological achievement. Western intelligence agencies obsessed over this delta-winged interceptor, analyzing every blurry photograph and radar signature, trying to understand capabilities that could determine victory or defeat in future conflicts. Israel faced an immediate problem. Its pilots flew French Mirages and aging Mysteries, proven designs but untested against this new threat. War planners knew aerial supremacy would decide any future conflict with Egypt and Syria, both of which were rapidly building MiG-21 fleets with Soviet assistance. Flying blind against an unknown enemy wasn't strategy. It was suicide. Traditional espionage couldn't penetrate Soviet security around the MiG program. The aircraft was produced in closed cities, tested at restricted facilities, and operated under protocols designed specifically to prevent Western access. Stealing technical documents would provide specifications, but nothing compared to the intelligence value of an actual aircraft. American and Israeli engineers needed to touch it, fly it, understand its strengths, and exploit its weaknesses. The challenge wasn't just acquiring the aircraft itself. Dozens of Arab pilots flew MiG-21s across multiple countries. The real problem was finding one vulnerable enough to approach, desperate enough to betray, and capable enough to deliver the aircraft intact across hostile territory. That combination of attributes narrowed the field dramatically. Intelligence officers understand a fundamental truth about human behavior. People don't betray their countries for abstract political reasons. They betray because of personal grievances, immediate needs, and the belief that their loyalty has gone unrewarded. Find the right resentment, and even the most secure system becomes vulnerable. Munir Redfa checked every box. Iraqi Air Force, one of their best pilots, Christian in a Muslim-dominated military, repeatedly passed over for advancement despite superior skills. He watched less capable officers promoted ahead of him because they had the right family connections or religious background. That kind of discrimination doesn't just create anger. It creates the cold calculation that asks, what am I sacrificing my life for? Mossad didn't approach Redfa directly with recruitment pitches. That's movie nonsense. They studied him for months through sources in Iraqi society, building a psychological profile that revealed every pressure point. His religion made him an outsider. His talent made him valuable. His frustration made him vulnerable. The combination was irresistible. The intermediary who made first contact wasn't a spy in a trench coat. He was a businessman with legitimate reasons to be in Baghdad, someone who could strike up casual conversations without triggering suspicion. Over months, these conversations allowed Redfa to voice frustrations he couldn't express to colleagues. The businessman listened, asked thoughtful questions, and slowly introduced the possibility that life could be different elsewhere. Only after this careful groundwork did Mossad make an actual offer. Come to Israel with a MiG-21, and we'll give you everything Iraq denied: financial security, a new identity, respect for your abilities rather than discrimination based on your faith. The offer addressed every grievance intelligence officers had identified. It wasn't bribery. It was psychological precision. Redfa's response revealed the intelligence officer's nightmare and dream simultaneously. He'd consider it, but only if his family could be evacuated first. This condition transformed a difficult operation into an enormously complex one. Extracting a pilot and aircraft was hard enough. Extracting his wife and children from Iraq without alerting security services required an entirely separate operation running parallel to the primary mission. The family exfiltration began weeks before Redfa's planned flight. Using forged documents that identified them as business people, his wife and children traveled overland toward Iran. Every checkpoint was a potential catastrophe. Every interaction with officials carried the risk of exposure. But Mossad had planned the route carefully, selecting crossing points where guards were known to be bribable or inattentive. Meanwhile, Redfa maintained absolute normalcy at his airbase. He flew scheduled missions, socialized with colleagues, gave no indication that anything had changed. This performance required remarkable psychological control. He was living a double life where one wrong word or inconsistent behavior could trigger investigation and destroy everything. The technical planning focused on a fundamental problem. How do you get a pilot to fly solo on a route that brings him near Israeli airspace without arousing suspicion? Iraqi Air Force protocols required paired flights for security and mutual support. Solo missions were rare and typically restricted to specific training exercises. Redfa proposed the solution himself. He'd volunteer for navigation training, claiming a desire to improve skills that would make him more competitive for advancement. The cover story was plausible because it aligned with his pattern of seeking professional development. His superiors approved the training without suspicion. The route he planned would take him west toward the Jordanian border before turning back inland. Iraqi controllers would monitor his progress through routine radio check-ins. But at a specific point, Redfa would break the pattern. He'd drop to low altitude where radar couldn't track him, fly silent across Jordan, then climb and dash for Israel before interceptors could respond. Israeli preparations were equally meticulous. Fighter patrols positioned near the border to escort the MiG once Redfa identified himself using pre-arranged codes. Air defense batteries received instructions to hold fire on a specific aircraft profile approaching from the east. Ramat David Air Base prepared for an emergency landing with fire crews and intelligence officers standing by. The morning of August 16, 1966, began like any routine training flight. Redfa arrived early, conducted his pre-flight inspection, and exchanged casual greetings with ground crew. Inside his helmet, his mind raced through contingencies. If Jordanian radar detected him, if Iraqi interceptors scrambled quickly, if Israeli air defenses misidentified him, if mechanical failure forced him down in hostile territory, any of these scenarios meant death or imprisonment. He lifted off at precisely the scheduled time, climbing to altitude and following his filed flight plan exactly. For 30 minutes, everything appeared normal to Iraqi controllers tracking him. They heard his routine check-ins, observed his adherence to the planned route, and had no reason for concern. Then, Redfa reached his decision point. Instead of turning back toward Iraqi territory as planned, he pushed the stick forward and dove. Altitude bled away rapidly as he dropped to terrain-hugging level where ground clutter would confuse radar returns. His transponder went silent. Controllers in Baghdad began transmitting urgently, but heard only static in response. He crossed into Jordan at near supersonic speed, the landscape blurring past his canopy as G-forces pressed him into his seat. Behind him, Iraqi air defense networks erupted into crisis mode. Interceptors scrambled from multiple bases. Controllers alerted Jordanian counterparts. But Redfa was already pulling up, climbing rapidly, while turning north toward Israel. His fuel gauges showed concerning numbers. The low-level dash had consumed reserves faster than calculated. If Israeli fighters didn't find him soon, he might not have enough fuel to reach a suitable airfield. The mathematics of survival narrowed with every second. Then he spotted them. Two Mirages closing from his left, Israeli Air Force roundels visible on their fuselages. Relief washed over him as they took up escort positions on either wing. One pilot gave him a thumbs up through the canopy. He'd made it. The hardest part was over. Israeli radar operators had been tracking the high-speed contact from the moment Redfa climbed out of Jordanian airspace. The coded transmission he sent on the prearranged frequency confirmed his identity and transformed a potential hostile into a friendly asset. Air defense commanders ordered interceptors to escort rather than engage. The landing at Ramat David was smooth, despite Redfa's exhaustion and stress. He taxied clear of the runway, shut down the Tumansky engine, and sat in the sudden silence trying to process what he'd just accomplished. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft while officers waited to greet him. He delivered the crown jewel of Soviet aviation to the West. Israeli and American engineers descended on the captured MiG with scientific fervor. Every component was photographed and measured. The aircraft was partially disassembled to reveal construction techniques Soviet designers had worked years to perfect. What emerged was a complex picture of engineering philosophy that prioritized different values than Western designs. The MiG-21's simplicity impressed, even as its crudeness disappointed. Soviet engineers had created a machine that conscript mechanics could maintain under field conditions rather than requiring precision tools and specialized training. Welds were rough, panel gaps wide, but the aircraft flew reliably despite apparent defects. Function over form, battlefield practicality over aesthetic perfection. The avionics told a similar story. Electronics using vacuum tubes rather than transistors made the systems bulky and power-hungry, but robust and repairable. The radar could barely track targets against ground clutter, but it worked dependably within its design parameters. Soviet doctrine emphasized ground-controlled interception anyway, with pilots following precise instructions from radar controllers rather than conducting independent searches. American test pilots who flew the captured MiG reported that it climbed magnificently and handled crisply at high speeds. But sustained maneuvering bled energy rapidly, and the delta wing became a liability in slower turning fights. The cockpit felt cramped with limited rearward visibility. The Tumansky engine responded well, but consumed fuel at staggering rates. These insights didn't make the MiG-21 suddenly obsolete. They revealed exploitable weaknesses that gave Israeli and American pilots tactical advantages in combat. Know the enemy's blind spots, and you can position attacks where detection is unlikely. Understand energy management limitations, and you can force opponents into flight regimes where they become vulnerable. The intelligence windfall extended beyond the aircraft's physical characteristics. Captured documents included maintenance manuals revealing common failure modes and troubleshooting procedures. Operational directives described Soviet tactical doctrine for employing MiG-21s in various scenarios. This comprehensive intelligence allowed Western air forces to develop specific countermeasures. Redfa settled into his new life in Israel under an assumed identity. The financial support exceeded what he'd earned as an Iraqi officer. His family, successfully evacuated, joined him to begin rebuilding in a society that judged abilities rather than religious background. The discrimination he'd endured was replaced by recognition of his skills. Iraq sentenced him to death in absentia during a trial he never attended. State media denounced him as a traitor corrupted by Zionist gold. These denunciations meant nothing to someone who'd already mentally severed ties with a country that treated him as second class despite his capabilities. Moscow's reaction was one of fury and embarrassment mixed with immediate damage control. Soviet engineers reviewed what Israel might learn from the captured aircraft and ordered modifications to radar systems, countermeasures, and tactics used by Warsaw Pact pilots. Export versions of the MiG-21 were deliberately downgraded to ensure that even if another fell into Western hands, it wouldn't reveal the full capabilities of frontline Soviet models. The operation's legacy extended far beyond the immediate intelligence gain. It demonstrated that human intelligence remains the ultimate vulnerability in even the most secure systems. Technology alone cannot protect secrets if the people with access can be persuaded to betray them. This lesson has driven intelligence operations ever since. For Israel, the captured MiG provided crucial tactical advantages during the Six-Day War less than a year later. Pilots knew exactly how MiG-21s performed in various flight regimes, understood their blind spots, and could exploit weaknesses ruthlessly. The aerial victories that gave Israel complete air superiority owed significant debt to intelligence gained through Redfa's defection. The story raises questions that remain uncomfortable decades later. Was exploiting Redfa's grievances ethical recruitment or psychological manipulation? Did Israeli intelligence operations serve legitimate security needs or cross boundaries into coercion? Where's the line between offering opportunities and preying on vulnerabilities? These questions have no clean answers because they depend entirely on your starting assumptions about the nature of intelligence work and the acceptable boundaries of state action in pursuit of security. Objectives. What's undeniable is that the operation succeeded brilliantly by identifying human vulnerability and exploiting it with precision that made military force unnecessary. The MiG-21 Radar FEA delivered now sits in an Israeli Air Force museum, a trophy of intelligence tradecraft and reminder that sometimes the most sophisticated weapon is understanding human psychology. The aircraft changed Middle Eastern military balance and exposed Soviet aviation secrets that took years to compensate for. But the real lesson wasn't about aircraft specifications or technical intelligence. It was about the permanent truth that systems are only as secure as the people operating them. And people, no matter how loyal or committed, remain vulnerable to their own needs, grievances, and calculations about whether their sacrifice serves purposes worthy of the cost they bear. Find the right pressure points, and even the most secure secrets become accessible. That's not a comforting thought in a world where technology proliferates and human nature remains constant. So what's the takeaway from Operation Diamond? That betrayal isn't about ideology or money as much as it's about dignity, recognition, and the belief that you're valued for your contributions rather than discriminated against for your identity. Redfa didn't defect because he loved Israel or hated Iraq. He defected because Iraq gave him every reason to believe his loyalty was wasted on a system that would never reward it fairly. That's the vulnerability every intelligence service looks for. And it's the reminder that no amount of physical security can protect secrets when the people with access feel betrayed by the very systems they're supposed to protect.